Hey there, my name's Jordan, and I'm a financial coach and financial planner. And today I'm your host at the Reimagine Wealth podcast, where we share imperfect stories about embodying our values, weaving just system level safety nets, and working to build the world that we want to live in, one where we all get to have our needs met and thrive. Let these be shared learnings that allow you to more deeply explore, experiment, and shift, and that allow us to unlock our collective knowledge. This show is ad-free and available to everyone, and it wouldn't be possible without your love and support. So if you like what you're listening to, please like, review, subscribe, and share the show with those in your community. If you're able, please support my work to produce the show by becoming a paid member of my Substack, which starts at $6 a month. Link to that and more is in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. And now let's get into the show.
Welcome, welcome. This is going to be the first episode of season 2 of the Reimagine Wealth podcast. I am super, super excited. I wanted to really ground this season in more political education. And I thought, what better political education to start with than a framework that I referenced in many episodes throughout season 1. And that is the Just Transition framework. And this is a theory of change that has been foundational in my work, in how I think about working towards collective liberation and shifting to a regenerative economy. And so we'll talk a little bit. And if you're watching the video, this is going to be one of the few, if maybe the only, that will have a video recording, because I am screen sharing from Movement Generation's website, because this is a framework that was co-created by Movement Generation and Climate Justice Alliance. So you can go on either of their websites. I'll have links to both in the show notes where you can look at the framework, read about it. There's a zine. The zine is awesome. And I just want to name that I'm not an expert in this topic. I have read the resources. It is a theory of change that I align myself with and that I ground my work in, that I ground my organizing in. And I am but a mere human who has learned about a framework, and I wasn't in the creation of it. So if you're listening to this and you know something that I don't, or you know something about the lore that maybe I misunderstood or I'm misrepresenting, I really invite you to call me in and let me know. I'm sharing my best understanding and best current thinking, and I don't know everything. So definitely invite feedback if there's things that I miss, things that I didn't share correctly. And I'm excited to share more about the framework overall with all of you. Okay, so just getting started, what even is a just transition? Like, what is that even talking about? So a just transition is talking about the way that we transition our economy from one that is extractive, or basically the economy that we're living in today, to one that is regenerative. So it's how do we shift from an economy that centers the enclosure of wealth and power to an economy that is built upon and centers social and ecological well-being. And we'll see that in just a minute. But when we think about how our economy has been structured and how it's currently operating, it's grounded in white supremacy and heteropatriarchy and consumerism and ableism. Its foundational elements are exploitation, growth at all costs, and it's, as we know, undermining the sustainability of not only our livelihoods, but the planet. And when we have an economy that is built upon extraction at a pace that our planet cannot keep pace with, we eventually are going to have to transition to some type of another economy. That will either happen through collapse or through a very intentional and strategic reorganization. So a really common phrase, and it's listed right here, is that transition is inevitable. It will come about by us either continuing to extract and experiencing collapse, and or through really intentional organizing, base building, reorganization, And so it's not a question of transition. It's a question of how do we transition to an economy that is just? And that is what this framework and theory is trying to address. So this is a little visual that talks about the framework. And just to give you a little bit of an overview, on the left-hand side, and this is mostly for the folks who are just listening to the audio, on the left-hand side, we have the extractive economy. That economy is centered on the exploitation of people and the planet. What are the levers that uphold this economy? When we think about how this economy exists, we know the purpose is the enclosure of wealth and power. It's based upon exploitation of people and planet. But what are the other levers that reinforce this economy being the dominant power? Well, it comes about when our worldview is built on consumerism and colonialism, when our governance is reinforced by militarism, and when our resources are generated by extracting them, burning them, and then dumping them. So we extract them, we use them up, we take them to the dump, and then they get either burned or they sit in the landfill. When we think about a regenerative economy, or as this framework calls it, a living economy, that is one where the purpose of the economy is ecological and social well-being. So purpose of the economy is to care for our planet and the humans and creatures that live on it. And so how does that economy come into being? Well, it comes through cooperation, when our work is done through cooperation and care. And what would be the levers that hold that up? Well, it would be a worldview that is based on caring and sacredness as opposed to consumerism and colonialism. It would be when our resources are created and produced and redistributed in a way that centers regeneration, and when our governance is based in deep democracy, like actual democracy. I'm not talking about we vote for a president. I'm talking about we are actually able to practice democracy at a variety of different scales. So like participatory budgeting, people's assemblies, things like that. And so that's just a little bit of just thinking about the extractive economy and the living economy, and we'll come back to what the transition requires in just a moment. But to share a little bit more about the history, the framework, my understanding of it is that it really came into being, and I'm sharing the history on the screen as well, is that it came into being through the dissonance that was happening at the intersection of labor organizing and climate justice organizing, because these groups were noticing that what they were working towards, in many ways, they were being pitted against each other. A more tangible example is when it comes to things like batteries that enable us to shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy and store that energy in batteries. A lot of those batteries are using lithium, and lithium is mined in the global south. And in particular, the people in those communities where it is mined are extremely extracted from. It's where a lot of the environmental racism takes place. And it also is where things like mines have collapsed in the global south and trapped people. So the working conditions are extremely severe, extremely harsh, and create so many opportunities for human rights violations. And so it's like, okay, great. We are transitioning our energy in the global north, but what's happening in the global south that's making that possible is still extractive. It is still harmful. And those are some of the contradictions that were coming up. And so both groups saw the need to start phasing out these industries that are harming workers and are also harming communities' health as well as the planet. And there's a need, right? There's a huge need for workers to find new livelihoods from these extractive industries. And so the Just Transition framework came about in building alliances between workers and frontline communities, and through the work of Movement Generation and Climate Justice Alliance. And it's intended to represent multiple aligned strategies to transition communities towards thriving economies that are centered around ecological and social well-being that can be governed by the people that are a part of those communities. And so, of course, are we living, is everyone living in the living economy today? Of course not. And we also can be in the practice of planting seeds and moving towards that every single day. And so how do we get there? How do we actually make this transition possible? It is going to take a variety of coordinated, overlapping strategies. And it's going to take us all, right? We all have to be organized and coordinated. And ultimately, what we need to do is stop the bad or resist while also building the new. And so basically, we need to have varying strategies to democratize, decentralize, and diversify our economic activity. So that's the building the new, while we also tamper down our consumption, redistribute our resources alongside our power. So, for example, we need to shift the economy from dirty energy to energy democracy, from funding highways to expanding public transit, from incinerators, and I'm just reading this from their website right now, from incinerators and landfills to zero waste, from industrial food systems to food sovereignty, from gentrification to community land rights, and from rampant destructive development to ecosystem restoration. So what is so central is deep democracy, where the people that are a part of the communities and the people that are working in these communities have direct control over decisions that affect their daily lives. So that is the practice of the deep democracy. And so this is going to take divesting from the power structures that uphold our extractive economy. So we need to continue to push for racial justice and social equity. We need to continue to fight to shift economic control into communities. Community loan funds are a great example of this, and you'll hear more from community loan funds later in this season. We need to be democratizing wealth in the workplace. So worker cooperatives, for example, as well as surplus being given to the workers as opposed to shareholders, as well as back to the communities where the wealth was extracted from as opposed to shareholders. We need to be advancing ecological restoration and centering Indigenous wisdom. And we need to be relocalizing production and consumption so that what we use and need can be produced in the communities that we're a part of, so that we don't have to be shipping produce across the world, for example. So we need to begin to produce what we need locally. And then we also need to be able to provide and participate in cultural restoration that really restores, honors, cares, and heals cultures and traditions that have been excluded in our dominant culture. And so, what are the takeaways here? We both have to stop the bad and build the new at the same time. We need to be divesting from these power structures and investing in our own power. And so when I think about finance and how finance can be applied to a just transition theory of change, that can be done through strategic and coordinated divestment. It can be done through contestment or shareholder advocacy, shareholder campaigns, where there are shareholders leveraging their power in coordination with workers or communities fighting against a corporation. And it can be done through reinvestment where we are moving our resources into a non-extractive economy, into projects that do center ecological and social well-being, that are practicing deep democracy, and that are centered on cooperation, regeneration, and care. All right. I know that this was more of a theoretical episode. I'm curious to hear what you all think. And I'm so excited to have this out to kind of ground not only this season, but even to better inform the discussions from the prior season. And ultimately, I would really encourage you to go learn more about this theory of change, learn more about the framework. There's things I didn't even get into, like the just transition principles, and think about ways that you can apply this theory of change to your work or parts of your life as well. And till the next episode, sending you all a lot of love, care, and resilience right now. As I'm recording this, ice is terrorizing our neighborhoods. I'm sending so much resilience to the people in Minneapolis. Y'all are giving me and so many others so much inspiration. And may we all be able to be together, support each other, and ultimately hold each other in these times.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reimagine Wealth podcast. You can find resources and links from today's episode in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, review, subscribe, and share this with those in your community. If you'd like to support the show, you can become a paid member of my Substack, which allows me to sustain this work and have more episodes to share in the future. Again, links to all of that and more are in the show notes. And until next time, I'm sending you resilience and warmth, and thank you so much for tuning in.